Dear participants, even a young child knows that the front end can be improved in many ways and with many different tools. But have you ever tried using psychology to do so? Such an opportunity would certainly improve our project and help us take a more proactive role in the development process. In front of us is Keren, a passionate React user, still eager to learn about new technologies. In her not-so-spare time, a psychology student too. Kenzi.
Hi everyone, I'm very excited to be here. And I chose to talk about applied psychology. In my day-to-day job, I'm a senior software engineer. I develop in React, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I used PHP, so I hope you still accept me in this conference. And the reason I think it's important is because we often get to implement some sort of design, usually a Figma, but sometimes we might work at startup that doesn't have a dedicated UX UI expert to provide us with a feature. Or sometimes they can be busy working on a different project, and I think it's really good to know the underlying cognitive psychology principle that guides UX expert in their work. So we can also take a more proactive step, offering improvement if we get a design, and know what really stand behind all those design we have to implement. So let's get started. So my name is Keren Kenzi. I'm a senior software engineer at Agora. It's a startup in the real estate field. And I'm really passionate about psychology other than programming. And I really like the combination of those two fields. When I study cognitive psychology, I thought about, this will be a great talk to share this knowledge with other programmers because it's really important. So cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is the field in psychology that studied mental processes underlying cognitions. So it includes perception, attention, imagery, language, memory, decision, and problem solving. So it's really all the cognitive stuff that we do. And today I'm going to focus on 3 of those processes, which I find most relevant to the field of front-end and design, which are perception, attention, and judgment as decision-making. So let's start with perception. We can think of perception kind of as a function. We perceive a lot of stimuli from the senses, right? We see things, we smell things, we hear things, and we take all this input and we translate it, we give an output as an experience of the world surrounding us. So when we talk about perception is how we perceive object, how we experience the world. And one of the theories that explains how we do that is the Gestalt psychology. They have theories that explain and principles that explain how we organize object, how we explain and perceive the object. And so when we talk about the Gestalt, we're probably familiar with the sentence, the whole is bigger than the sum of its part. So this is exactly what the Gestalts talk about. So one of the laws is the law of pregnance, which is also known as the good figure, law of the good figure, or the law of simplicity. Meaning, if we see complex object, if we see ambiguous object in the world, our brain tries to do as much less work as possible. We have limited capacity, just like computers, so we want to reduce the load on our brain. We want to keep it simple as possible. So here we take a look at the Olympic symbol. We just had the Olympics. And instead of seeing this as 9 separate objects, we actually really see 5 rings, right? So this is an example of the law of pregnance. So let's move to other principles that the Gestalt talk about, and one of them is the principle of proximity. If we take a look here at the buttons and the text is in an even space from the first button and the last button. So what happens here is it will take our brain more time to process and understand which button this text describes, right? We don't know if it's the button above or the button below, but, right? If we put the text over here, our brain automatically will know to group those things together, right? We will automatically know that the text belongs to the upper button and not the last one. But if I put it, for example, over here, then automatically our brain knows to group those things together as related. So the principle of proximity says that objects that are near each other are perceived as grouped together. We can see a different example of this law being applied. I took the PHPCon website to demonstrate it. You can see that each image has the name of the speaker and the title right near it, right? So our brain, make it easy for our brain to cluster the relevant information all together. Now, this is the conference website, but we can apply it to every website and product we design, whether we display user information, whether we display location and other information on the product. And again, another example from the website of the amazing team that we have here working behind the scene to make this amazing conference. So it is another example. Another example is, can be viewed over here. When we have form and we have section, we can see here that we have this kind of divider, you see over here? But actually, we don't need to add this divider because our brain knows to group together. If I remove this divider, our brain will still know that this first section is related, is a separate section, because we can see here that there is a gap between the section. So we automatically group together all the section as section 1 and section 2, and this way we keep the design more aesthetic, right? It's more clean that way. We don't even need a divider. We keep it clean, keep it simple, and reduce the cognitive load. Let's move to another principle, the principle of similarity. So similar elements are perceived as grouped together as well. They can be similar by size, by color, by direction, by shape, etc. So let's take a look at an example. So here we can see the number of reasons to attend PHPCon, right? So we can see here that each of the reasons have the same style, right? So we know that they actually belong to the same category. Each of them is a category that explains why to attend this conference, okay? So we have this icon and the title, and they all share a similar style. We can also see another example of this principle being applied in the agenda, for example. We can see that the different tracks are distinct by different colors. We can see that the different talks are distinct by the different language that they are given. So we can automatically know which talks are in English, which talks are in Polish, and our brain automatically sees it. It's straight away visible. And here is another example. We have filters. Recently, I had to implement several filters in our product, so it's a fresh example. So we see here that all the filters share a similar style. Then the user knows, okay, all those are filters. They share a similar look and feel. Each one of them has a drop down and a name, so they actually belong to the same category. Moving on to attention. Now, I know it's the talk before the lunch, so I'm not sure, I hope you pay attention to the talk. But attention is talking about how we kind of focus our attention on certain things, thoughts, etc., and avoid other, for example, the urge to watch Netflix or the urge to scroll on the phone and stuff like that, right? So it's a more evolved, more higher process than perception. It's really hard, right? You can all agree it's harder to stay focused on the talk before lunch. So I hope I have your attention. So how do we grab the user attention on a website? How do we grab the attention to the most important information that we want? We want to keep it simple. We want the important information be easily identified and located and used. So fun facts. This is a picture I took from a previous conference, from the video. When we are networking, for example, it's an example of how we focus our attention. When we are outside on a coffee break or networking at a conference, we pay attention and focus only on the conversation that we have, right? There are several conversations surrounding us happening all at the same time, but we still manage to keep our focus talking to the person in front of us, right? So this is called the cocktail party effect, but it has an exception. For example, if somebody says our name, or if somebody says PHP, it might draw our attention to those, right? So this is just a fun anecdote. So how do we grab the attention of the user? Let's take a look for the PHPCon website. So the most important information stand out. Whenever we go to a website, I took it as an example, but it can be your product, every website that you develop. You can straight away see the location, you can straight away see the date. So easy to locate, easy to identify. Another way to convey and attract the user to a certain element on the screen or on the product is to use different kind of styling, is to combine numbers with fonts. Instead of saying like, this conference will have 27 speakers, 3 tracks, and 8 workshops, I can convey the same message clearer, right? It reduces the cognitive load. I straight away see the important information. I don't need to read a long sentence. I can just straight away see those. And another thing we can do, as we are visual creatures, by the way, our brain, our vision system, has the largest amount of neurons in the brains, more than the hearing system, etc. So by adding an image, we can convey, even further convey the message that we want. For example, if we want to say come and network in this conference, we can use an image to convey the same message. And if we're talking about graphs and data, usually we have some reports in our product. We can use different kind of coloring, different kind of font to emphasize and draw the attention to the key information we want the user to see in the product. Ready from some other processes? Ready from some check? Okay, so it's a memory test. So I'm going to show you a few things, a few stimuli, and I want you to try to remember as much as possible. Ready? Yeah. Okay. Raise your hand if you remember the number 9. Okay, good. PHPCon? Better. And 5? Great. What about 22? Okay, I see less fingers. This demonstrates studies and effect that were shown in other memories studies that claims that people tend to remember the first thing that they see, the first thing that they hear, because we have more time to process and memorize it. And we also tend to remember the last things, because it's fresher in our memory. But we also tend to remember things that stand out. The PHPCon here stood out, right? We saw a lot of numbers, and then suddenly PHPCon. So, wait, numbers? Wait, PHP? Okay, I remember the PHP. So it is a demonstration of the von Ristorff effect, the isolation effect, which shows that when similar stimuli are presented, we tend to remember the one that differs from the rest. So how do we take this principle and apply it to a product, right? So let's see an example. For example, if we take a look at airline companies, we have several options we can choose for. Which one do we remember? Which one will stand out? The one that has the recommendation tag, right? It's not only airlines, it's also in other product that gives you a recommendation. The recommendation really stand out. We have usually a tag, usually we have a bigger border, and stuff like that. So let's move on to a more complex mental processes, such as judgment and decision making. Now, those processes can be hard to do, they're more complex. But we have mental models for their rescue. What do I mean by mental models? Mental models are eternal representation of the object and the things that we know about the world, that we keep with ourselves. We form it based on prior knowledge, past experience, etc. For example, if we are on a dating app and we know that we use like swipe left, swipe right, and then we go on and use something new came up, there is a new dating app, and we open the dating app and we expect to do the same thing, right? We expect it to have the similar behavior, swiping left and right. So based on our previous expectation, based on the mental models, we know what to expect. We want to align the design that we do to make it more intuitive by sticking to the mental processes that people have. For example, we have the shopping cart. So product that sells something has the shopping cart. If you want to order lunch for Wolt or takeaways or whatever app that you have here, we can choose, for example, what we want to eat for lunch and order it, and it will appear in the shopping cart, right? So the shopping cart is it's an example how we take the mental model that we have based on our experience in the real world, in the real shopping cart, and then we apply it to the design, to the product. And we have another example, the save button. Does anyone seen here in floppy disk in real life, or just, okay. So the right crowd, yeah. So I saw a picture once, a joke saying like, oh, mommy, you 3D printed a save button. So you never know. So this is another example of how we utilize mental models to our product, the save button of Microsoft. And let's do another thing. Let's choose something to eat. Let's choose our favorite dessert. Are you ready? You can scan the QR. And I want you to make a decision. Enter the number of your favorite dessert. It will show up here. Numbers. Let's hide it. And let's see the results. Come on, don't be shy, it's anonymous. I won't know if you cheat, if you're on a diet and you will choose the pancakes. I will not know. So let's see. Basically, it's a cloud word. It takes the option that is most selected and show it in a bigger font. I see 23 is the lead. Let's remove this. Oh, cheesecake is your favorite. Nice. And what about now? Select your favorite dessert. Only out of 3. 1, 2, or 3. Okay. I see the chocolate is... who is a son of Satan with a 60. Cute. Okay. So when I show you this, what was easier, to select in the first slide or to select in this option? Second one. Why? Because we had less option. So this is exactly what, this is just a picture, the hikes law talks about. The more choices we have, the longer it will take us to make a decision, right? Because we have to compare, do I want to eat pancake? I ate pancake yesterday. Do I want to have chocolate? So we have to kind of take all this different consideration into account, comparing so many options. It takes time. It's a long process. So it's really recommended to keep it simple and present to the user only 3 to 4 options to select from. We can think, for example, on a flight, right? When we want to book a flight, usually airline companies will show only 3 to 4 options, right? Usually 3. Because if I showed you all the different combination of seats, all the different combination of luggage, let's say I want to add like a 10-kilogram luggage, all the stuff, all the different combination of flexible, not flexible, with a bag, without a bag, with it all, by the time I select the options, probably the flight will double, and I will stay at home, not taking the vacation because the price will be too high, right? So usually what we see in flights application, that we have only 3 options, something like this, and it makes it easier to decide, right? Additional thing about option is when the user gets so many options to select from, or so many information they need to fill, they might feel overwhelmed, right? Like, oh my God, I need to select all this thing, I need to fill in all this different kind of information. And users that feel overwhelmed about the option and the information they have to fill might abandon our product, might abandon our app. So we don't want to do this. What we want to do is to take them step by step, hand by hand, and show them gradually the steps and the information they need to fill. For example, we can show them first select the type of ticket that you want. Then we move on to selecting the seats. Then we move on to select it. Maybe we want to rent a car, maybe we don't want to rent a car. But we don't need to fill all the entire information all at once at the beginning, right? So it's more easier, more user-friendly for our user. So let's talk about how decisions are depending on the choice and the way we present the choices to the user. So a little thing interesting is that they found a research conducted by Johnson and Goldstein back in 2003 found that the way that you present option to the user affect the way they make a decision. For example, they did a survey about something really serious. It's about becoming an organ donor. So they found out that countries that have a high rate of volunteers, of people that want to become an organ donor after their death, which is a very serious and can save life, they found in countries that have higher rates, what happens is that everybody is a donor by default. Okay? So if you don't want to become one, what you need to do is to opt out. You need to take an active step in order to say, no, I don't want to become a donor. So while in other countries that we have a low consent rate, what we have is basically an opt-in procedure. We have to voluntarily do an active act. We need to make checkbox the sign that we do want to become an active donor. So it's really affect the way the user interacts with the system. And I know it's talking about organ donation. It's really serious, and people, think that is an heavy choice to make. But we have similar decisions, not similar in the sense of heaviness, but in the settings and stuff like that, we also have to choose stuff that we do. We need to configure our system, we need to configure our preferences, and the way the user interacts with the system is affected by the defaults that we put or don't put. If we do a toggle with checkbox, which is checked or not, affects the way the user interacts with the system, and we can kind of take the user in the way that we want them to use the system. So this is what I talked about. Are you opt in or are you opt out? It's as important on the way the user make a decision. And cookies is an example of opt-out procedure. We usually need to manage the cookies, usually need to opt out. We need to take an active step in order to not collect all our data. And it's also related to just a fun fact, it's also related to the status quo bias, which is the tendency to do nothing when a decision needs to make. And we need to know about all those biases and all those things, because at the end, our product is for user. Until robots replace us, we're still interacting with humans, so we need to understand how the human brain works, how we can affect the user decision and the way they interact with our system. So, as I mentioned before, it's mostly related to the setting and configuration. So keep that in mind when you design and implement a setting, whether you want to keep the defaults checked or unchecked, etc. And we talked about all these kind of principles, and by applying those principles to our design, we not only make it user-friendly and reduce the cognitive load, we also make it more aesthetic. Right? We saw with the divider, it's even more aesthetic design without it. So the more there is a effect that calls the aesthetic usability effect, when the more aesthetic the website is, it's perceived as more effective and easier to use. Which kind of reminds me of another bias in psychology, which is the halo effect, which is the tendency, if you meet a person and this person is attractive, you might attribute to them additional good trait. For example, you think, he's attractive, he must be smart. There are studies that show this in interviews and stuff like that, that attractive candidate has more successful rate passing interviews, because we automatically assume that if they have one good trait, they might have another one, even if it's there is no real life indication. So this is just a fun fact. And if you want to read more, I summarized it in a blog post. If I missed anything, it's on the blog post. So you can scan it if you like. And I would really love to hear from you. This is the end of the talk. I showed you some principles. I hope you can apply them to your design, or even when you get a new Figma design, maybe you can suggest even to the XUI person like improvement and stuff to do, take a more proactive role. Even if you're a backend developer, if you're involved in the design, in the implementation, you can still offer ideas to improve the design, even if you're not dealing with the front end. I think it's always important to be proactive in our job and show some initiative. And I would love to hear from you what principle you found most interesting. If you have other example, and if you have other insight, feel free to share the comments. And I want to thank you all, and have a wonderful lunch, and enjoy the rest of the conference.